Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The investigation begins. David Rowe adjusted the wire beneath his denim shirt, checking his reflection in the diner's grimy bathroom mirror. 3 months of growing out his beard and adopting the persona of Danny Rivers, a small-time drug dealer, had transformed him completely. The scar above his left eyebrow, a souvenir from Kandahar, was the only feature that remained distinctly his own. At 42, David had spent 15 years in Army Special Forces before transitioning to private investigation work. His specialty was deep cover operations that regular law enforcement couldn't touch. This case had started like any other. Stuart Taylor, a federal prosecutor, had hired him to investigate rumors of police corruption in the Metro East precinct. What had begun as suspected evidence tampering had evolved into something far more sinister. David returned to his booth, where Detective Cameron Kelly sat nursing his third bourbon. Kelly was a 20-year veteran with dead eyes and hands that never stopped moving. Classic signs of a man with too many secrets. At 55, he'd been working the streets long enough to know where all the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. So, Danny. Kelly's voice carried the gravelly tone of a 2-pack-a-day habit. You're saying you can move this much product without any heat? David leaned back, playing the part perfectly. Heat ain't my problem, detective. I got connections that keep things clean. Question is, can you keep your boys from sniffing around my operations? Kelly's laugh was harsh. For the right price, my boys don't see nothing. But understand something. Once you're in business with us, there ain't no getting out. We got ways of ensuring loyalty. The implied threat wasn't lost on David. Over the past months, he documented Kelly's network. Detective Blake Hood, a violent enforcer who enjoyed the physical aspects of police work too much. Detective Jason Camp, the money man who laundered proceeds through a series of shell companies. And most disturbingly, Detective Jen Stokes, who specialized in making witnesses disappear permanently. What kind of insurance we talking about? David asked, taking a careful sip of his beer. Kelly's smile revealed teeth stained by years of tobacco and coffee. We like to know who we're dealing with. Real names, addresses, family members. Just in case business relationships go south. David had prepared for this moment. The identity of Danny Rivers was bulletproof. Fake background, criminal history, even a fake ex-wife in Oregon. But Kelly's words carried an undertone that suggested they already knew more than they were letting on. Family's off limits, David said firmly. Business is business. Everything's on limits when you're dealing with us, Kelly replied, his demeanor shifting from friendly to predatory. But don't worry, Danny. Good partners don't have problems. It's the bad ones that end up regretting their career choices. After they parted ways, David sat in his surveillance van, reviewing the recording equipment. Stuart Taylor's voice crackled through the encrypted radio. How deep does this go, David? Deeper than we thought, David replied, watching Kelly's cruiser disappear into traffic. This isn't just about skimming drug money. They're running a full protection racket, and they've got judges, prosecutors, even some FBI agents in their pocket. Evidence, getting there. But Stuart, they're getting suspicious. Kelly's fishing for personal information, and his questions are too specific for comfort. Maybe it's time to pull you out. David thought about his wife, Lori, and their 16-year-old son, Timothy. He'd been away from home too much lately, missing Timothy's football games and Lori's attempts at family dinners. But this case was bigger than family time. Lives were at stake. Not yet. I'm close to getting the evidence. We need to bring down the whole network. Give me 2 more weeks. David didn't know that his conversation was being monitored by Detective Jason Camp, who sat in an unmarked car 2 blocks away with sophisticated listening equipment. Camp smiled as he ended the recording and dialed Kelly's number. Boss, we got a problem. Danny Rivers just told someone named Stuart that he needs 2 more weeks to bring down our whole network. Kelly's response was immediate and cold. Find out everything about Danny Rivers. Real name, real family, real address. And Jason, do it tonight. Chapter 2, The Trap Springs. David's home in suburban Millbrook was a testament to 15 years of military discipline and 10 years of investigative work. Every security measure was carefully planned but invisible. Motion sensors disguised as landscape lighting, reinforced door frames that looked standard, and a safe room in the basement that appeared to be a wine cellar. Lori Norris Rowe had adapted to her husband's dangerous profession over the years, but the stress showed in the worry lines around her green eyes. At 38, she maintained the athletic build of her college soccer days, though David noticed she'd been more anxious lately, jumping at unexpected sounds and checking locks obsessively. "How much longer?" she asked as David entered their kitchen at 11 p.m., still in his Danny Rivers outfit. "Soon," David promised, pulling her into an embrace. "This case is almost over, and then I'm thinking we take that vacation to Colorado you've been wanting." Timothy bounded down the stairs, his 16-year-old frame finally catching up to his adult height. "Dad, you missed practice again. Coach says scouts from state are coming to Friday's game." David felt the familiar pang of guilt. "I'll be there, son. Wouldn't miss it." But even as he made the promise, David's phone buzzed with a text from Stuart Taylor. "Meeting tomorrow, 6 a.m. Urgent developments." What David didn't know was that 3 miles away, Detective Blake Hood was studying photos and documents spread across Kelly's desk. Hood was built like the linebacker he'd been in high school, 6'4", 250 pounds of barely controlled violence. His methods of extracting information were legendary in certain circles. David Rowe, age 42, Hood read aloud. Former Army Rangers, specialized in counterintelligence. Wife Lori Norris Rowe, works at Millbrook Elementary. Son Timothy Rowe, Jr. at Millbrook High. Kelly studied the family photo Hood had obtained from David's personnel file. Military background explains why he's so good at this undercover shit. Question is, how do we leverage his family without creating a federal incident? "Leave that to me," said Jen Stokes, entering the office with a manila folder. At 35, Stokes was the most dangerous member of Kelly's crew precisely because she appeared so ordinary. Average height, brown hair, unremarkable features. The perfect camouflage for someone who specialized in making problems disappear. Lori Rowe volunteers at the community center every Tuesday, Stokes continued. She's been asking questions about neighborhood security lately. Almost like she knows her husband's in a dangerous line of work. Kelly's eyes narrowed. "Interesting. What kind of questions?" "Security camera locations, police response times to domestic disturbances, which neighbors have concealed carry permits." "Smart woman." Jason Camp looked up from his laptop. "There's more. David Rowe's been paying for private security consultations for his home. High-end stuff, panic rooms, encrypted communications, even had a former Delta Force operator install his system." Kelly began pacing, his mind working through the implications. "So we're not dealing with some amateur PI. This guy's a professional, and he's prepared for retaliation. What's the play?" Hood asked, flexing his hands unconsciously. "We turn his preparation against him," Kelly said slowly. "His wife's smart, cautious, protective of her family. That makes her predictable, and predictable people are easy to manipulate." Stokes smiled, though it never reached her eyes. "You want me to approach her?" "Not directly. Too risky. But I'm betting Lori Rowe is exactly the type of person who'd cooperate with police if she thought it would protect her family." Kelly pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Detective Rodriguez? This is Cameron Kelly, Metro East. I need a favor. We're working a joint operation with the FBI, and we need to interview the wife of one of their undercover assets." 20 minutes later, Kelly had arranged for Lori to be contacted by what she would believe was a legitimate federal operation. She'd be told that her husband was in danger, that corrupt police officers had discovered his identity, and that her cooperation was essential to keep her family safe. "Once we have her cooperation," Kelly explained to his team, "we control the information flow. We'll know exactly what David Rowe knows when he knows it, and we can stay 3 steps ahead of his investigation." Hood cracked his knuckles. "And if the wife doesn't cooperate?" Kelly's smile was predatory. "Then we move to plan B. But trust me, Blake, once Lori Rowe believes her family is in danger, she'll do anything to protect them, including betraying her husband." At that moment, David was reviewing surveillance footage in his van, unaware that his carefully constructed investigation was about to become a trap with his own family as bait. Chapter 3: Family Leverage. The meeting with Stuart Taylor took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the industrial district. David arrived early, checking sightlines and exit routes, old habits from his military days. Stuart was already there, pacing nervously beside a folding table covered with photographs and documents. "We've got a problem," Stuart began without preamble. "3 witnesses in the Metro East corruption case have gone missing in the past week. Not relocated, not in protective custody, missing." David studied the photographs. Maria Santos, a convenience store owner who'd witnessed police taking protection money. Thomas Chun, a small-time dealer who'd offered to testify about police involvement in the drug trade. And Rebecca Martinez, a prosecutor who'd been building a case against Kelly's crew. "Jen Stokes?" David asked. "Most likely. But David, there's more. We intercepted communications suggesting they know about the investigation. Not just that it exists, they know details." David felt ice forming in his stomach. "How much do they know?" "Enough to be planning countermeasures. I'm pulling you out today." "No." David's voice carried the authority of his military training. "If we pull out now, Kelly's crew goes underground and we lose our best chance to stop them. Give me 48 hours to get the evidence we need." Stuart Taylor was a seasoned prosecutor who'd worked with dozens of undercover operatives, but something in David's tone made him pause. "What aren't you telling me?" "I think they're going to move against my family." The words hung in the air between them. Stuart had always known this was a possibility, but David's certainty was chilling. "How do you know?" Kelly's questions last night were too specific. "He's fishing for personal information, and his crew has the resources to find it. Military records, property deeds, school enrollment. It's all accessible if you know where to look." Stuart began packing the documents. "Then we're definitely pulling you out." "Stuart, listen to me. Lori and Timothy are protected. I've spent years preparing for this possibility. But if we walk away now, Kelly's crew will realize they were right to be suspicious. They'll disappear the evidence, eliminate witnesses, and start over somewhere else. How many more families will suffer?" Before Stuart could respond, David's encrypted phone buzzed with a text from Lori. "FBI agents here. Say you're in danger. Need to talk to you immediately." David's blood ran cold. "Stuart, did you send federal agents to my house?" "No. We agreed all contact would be through you directly." David was already running toward his van. "They're not FBI agents." 15 miles away, Lori Rowe sat in her living room, facing 2 people who'd shown her convincing federal credentials. The woman, who'd introduced herself as Special Agent Jennifer Stone, was explaining how her husband's investigation had been compromised. "Mrs. Rowe, your husband is in immediate danger. Corrupt police officers have identified him as a federal informant, and we have credible intelligence suggesting they're planning to eliminate him tonight." The man, Agent Bradley Hall, was actually Detective Jason Camp in a borrowed suit and fake ID. "We need your husband to abort his mission immediately and report to our safe house." Lori's hands shook as she reached for her phone. "I should call him." "No," Stone Stokes said quickly. "His communications are being monitored. We need you to deliver a message in person. Tell him to meet you at the old Miller farm on Route 47. We'll have agents waiting to extract him safely." Timothy appeared at the top of the stairs, backpack slung over his shoulder. "Mom, I'm heading to Jake's to work on our chemistry project." "Actually," Agent Hall stood, "we'd prefer if Timothy stayed here until this situation is resolved. For his own safety." Lori's maternal instincts flared. "What kind of danger is my son in?" "The corrupt officers we're investigating have been known to target family members," Stone explained. "It's just a precaution." As Lori debated, she didn't notice Hall moving casually toward the back door, cutting off Timothy's escape route, or that Stone's hand had moved closer to her concealed weapon. "Mrs. Rowe," Stone continued, "every minute we delay puts your husband in greater danger. These are very bad people who won't hesitate to hurt your family to protect themselves." David's truck skidded into his driveway 35 minutes later. He could see Lori's car in the garage, lights on in the living room, but something felt wrong. The motion sensors he'd installed weren't showing the normal patterns of movement through the house. His phone rang, Lori's number. "David." Her voice sounded strained. "The FBI agent said, I need to give you a message." "Lori, listen carefully. Are you alone? No, they're right here. They said to tell you to meet us at the old Miller farm on Route 47. They have a safe house set up. David closed his eyes. The Miller farm had been abandoned for years, the perfect location for an ambush. And Lori's code phrase, something they'd agreed on years ago, was missing from her message. Okay, honey, I'll head there now. Is Timothy with you? A pause. Yes, he's here. David, they said these corrupt police officers might try to hurt our family. The fear in her voice was real, which meant she genuinely believed she was helping FBI agents protect her family. David's jaw clenched as he realized the elegant simplicity of Kelly's trap. Use Lori's love for her family against both of them. Tell the agents I'll be there in an hour, David said. And Lori, I love you. I love you too. As David ended the call, he was already formulating a plan. Kelly's crew had made one critical error. They'd assumed David would react emotionally to threats against his family. But 15 years of military training had taught him that emotional responses got people killed. David Rowe began preparing for war. Chapter 4. The Hunt Begins. David drove to a storage unit on the east side of town, one that wasn't connected to any of his known identities. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and hidden behind boxes of Christmas decorations, was his go-bag from his Special Forces days. Body armor, night vision goggles, encrypted satellite phone, medical supplies, and enough weapons to outfit a small squad. As he checked the action on his suppressed M4 rifle, David's phone rang. Stuart Taylor. David, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. Kelly's crew has my family. They're using Lori to lure me into an ambush at the Miller farm. Jesus Christ. We need to call in federal backup immediately. No time. And Stuart? We don't know how deep this corruption goes. Kelly mentioned having federal contacts. For all we know, backup might be working for them. David could hear Stuart's frustration through the phone. You can't go in alone, David. That's suicide. Not alone. There's someone I trust who can help. 20 minutes later, David met Thomas Doyle at a 24-hour diner on the interstate. Doyle was everything Kelly and his crew weren't. An honest cop who'd spent 12 years building a reputation for integrity. At 38, he'd turned down promotions that would have taken him away from street patrol, preferring to work cases that actually helped people. Kelly's crew took my family, David explained, showing Doyle his federal investigator credentials. I need someone I can trust to watch my back. Doyle studied the badge and identification carefully. I've been suspicious of Kelly's operation for years, but Internal Affairs said there wasn't enough evidence. What do you have? David played selected portions of his recorded conversations with Kelly, enough to establish the corruption without revealing the full scope of his investigation. Son of a bitch, Doyle muttered. How can I help? The Miller farm on Route 47. Kelly's crew is holding my family there, hoping to ambush me. I need you to call in backup, but carefully, we can't trust anyone who might be connected to Kelly. I know some state police who are clean, Doyle said, but it'll take time to coordinate. Then coordinate fast. I'm going in to extract my family, whether backup arrives or not. Doyle grabbed David's arm. That's not a plan, that's suicide. David's smile was cold. Officer Doyle, I've spent 15 years in combat zones. Rescuing hostages from bad guys is what I do. The only difference is this time it's personal. Meanwhile, at the Miller farm, Kelly was growing impatient. The old farmhouse sat on 50 acres of overgrown fields, perfect for their purposes. Blake Hood had positioned himself in the barn with a rifle, while Jason Camp watched the access road from the second floor of the house. Jen Stokes remained with Lori and Timothy in the basement, maintaining the fiction that they were FBI agents. Where is he? Kelly muttered, checking his watch. It's been 2 hours. Camp's radio crackled. Boss, I see headlights coming up the road. Single vehicle, moving slow. Kelly smiled. Showtime. Remember, we need Rowe alive long enough to find out what evidence he's collected and who else knows about it. In the basement, Lori held Timothy close, both of them cable-tied to chairs. Timothy had figured out something was wrong when he tried to use the bathroom, and Agent Stone had insisted on following him. The fake FBI credentials had been convincing, but the woman's behavior was becoming increasingly hostile. Mom, Timothy whispered, these aren't FBI agents. I know. Honey, Lori whispered back. Your father will come for us. Stokes overheard. Yeah, he's coming all right. Question is whether you'll still be alive when this is over. The mask was finally off. Lori realized with growing terror that her cooperation had walked her family into a death trap. Outside, David belly-crawled through the tall grass surrounding the farmhouse, night vision goggles revealing the positions of Kelly's crew. His military training had taught him that the key to any successful assault was patience and accurate intelligence. Hood in the barn, approximately 200 yards from the house. Camp in the upper floor window, good view of the access road, but blind spots to the north and west. Kelly's position unknown, probably mobile. At least one more person in the basement with his family. David keyed his radio. Doyle, what's your ETA on backup? 20 minutes. State police are mobilizing, but they want to set up a perimeter first. No time. I'm going in. David, wait. David switched off the radio. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a hostage situation, especially when the hostage takers had no intention of letting anyone leave alive. He began moving toward the barn. Chapter 5. Strike and Counterstrike. Blake had died without making a sound. David's knife slid between his ribs as Hood peered through his rifle scope, watching for movement on the access road. 15 years of close-quarters combat training had taught David exactly where to strike for an instant, silent kill. David took Hood's position and rifle, using the elevated view to study the farmhouse. Through the night vision scope, he could see Jason Camp in the second-floor window, still watching the road. No sign of Kelly, but there were lights in the basement, probably where his family was being held. His satellite phone buzzed with a text message. David, if you can read this, respond immediately. We know you're here. CK. Cameron Kelly had found David's regular phone in the abandoned truck at the bottom of the access road and was using it to communicate. David smiled grimly. Kelly was smart, but not smart enough to realize David had backup communications. David texted back from his regular phone, which he'd left in the truck. I'm here. Let my family go and we can talk. Kelly's response was immediate. Basement. Come alone, hands visible, or your wife and son die. David knew it was a trap, but he also knew Kelly needed him alive to find out what evidence existed and who else knew about the corruption. That gave him a narrow window of opportunity. He moved silently toward the house, staying in the blind spots he'd identified. Camp was still at his window, but his attention was focused on the truck David had abandoned. Amateur mistake. In a real tactical situation, you never stopped watching your assigned sectors. David reached the basement window and peered inside. Lori and Timothy were tied to chairs in the center of a concrete room. Jen Stokes stood behind them with a pistol, while Kelly paced nearby. Both looked tense, but confident. They believed they held all the advantages. Mr. Rowe, Kelly called out. I know you're out there. Time to discuss terms. David checked his watch. Doyle's backup would arrive in 12 minutes, assuming they were actually coming and not compromised. He needed to create chaos and confusion to give himself a chance. From his position at the basement window, David had a clear shot at Stokes. But taking it would expose his family to return fire and alert camp to his position. Instead, he pulled out a flashbang grenade, a non-lethal but disorienting explosive that would temporarily blind and deafen everyone in the room. David smashed the basement window and tossed the grenade inside, then rolled away from the window as the deafening explosion lit up the night. Shouts of confusion came from inside the house, along with Kelly's voice screaming orders. Camp's rifle barked from the second floor, but he was firing blindly at the broken basement window. David was already moving, circling to the front door of the farmhouse. In the basement, Kelly staggered to his feet, ears ringing from the flashbang. Stokes was down, clutching her eyes and moaning. Lori and Timothy were conscious but disoriented, their chairs knocked over by the explosion. Blake! Jason! Report! Kelly shouted into his radio. No response from Hood, which meant he was either dead or captured. Camp's voice crackled through. Basement window. He's outside. Kelly grabbed Stokes' pistol and hauled Timothy to his feet, pressing the gun against the teenager's temple. Rowe, I know you're listening. You've got 30 seconds to show yourself or your son dies. David heard Kelly's ultimatum as he reached the front door. The house was old, with a simple lock that took him 15 seconds to pick. He moved through the dark hallway, following the sound of Kelly's voice toward the basement stairs. 20 seconds, Rowe. David appeared at the top of the basement stairs, hands raised, but with his rifle slung across his back. I'm here, Kelly. Let him go. Kelly smiled, though his hand shook slightly from adrenaline. Come down slowly. Any sudden movements, and Junior here gets a permanent headache. As David descended the stairs, he noted the positions of everyone in the room. Kelly was using Timothy as a human shield, smart positioning. Stokes was recovering from the flashbang, reaching for a backup weapon. Lori was watching him with desperate hope in her eyes. That was pretty impressive, Rowe, Kelly said when David reached the bottom of the stairs. Military training? Something like that. Here's how this works, Kelly continued. You're going to tell me exactly what evidence you've collected, who you've shared it with, and where it's stored. Then maybe your family walks away from this. David noticed Stokes had found her backup pistol and was moving to flank him. Time was running out. The evidence is uploaded to multiple secure servers, David lied smoothly. If I don't check in every 12 hours, it automatically gets transmitted to the FBI, DEA, and State Attorney General's office. Kelly's eyes narrowed. Bullshit. Check my phone. There's a dead man's app that. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air. Kelly's head snapped toward the basement window, and in that instant of distraction, David moved. Chapter 6. Blood and Betrayal. David's combat reflexes kicked in with lethal precision. As Kelly's attention shifted to the sirens, David dove sideways, rolling behind an old furnace as Jen Stokes opened fire. Her first shot missed by inches, sparking off concrete. Timothy, get down, David shouted. His son, despite being tied to a chair, managed to throw himself sideways as Kelly spun back, firing wildly. David's training had included hostage rescue scenarios exactly like this. Close quarters, multiple threats, innocent lives at stake. David drew his sidearm and put 2 rounds center mass into Stokes before she could fire again. She dropped, her weapon clattering across the concrete floor. Kelly still held Timothy, but the boy was struggling, making Kelly's aim impossible. Let him go, Kelly, David called out, advancing slowly. It's over. That's state police outside. No, Kelly's voice cracked with desperation. I'm walking out of here, and the kid's my insurance. What Kelly didn't know was that Timothy Rowe had inherited his father's tactical intelligence. The teenager had been quietly working on his restraints throughout the confrontation, and now he bit down hard on Kelly's arm while simultaneously throwing his weight backward. Kelly screamed and loosened his grip just enough for Timothy to break free. David's shot took Kelly in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his pistol flying. Dad! Timothy scrambled toward his mother, working on her restraints with shaking hands. David kept his weapon trained on Kelly, who was clutching his wounded shoulder and cursing. Outside, the sirens were getting closer. Thomas Doyle's backup had finally arrived. You think this is over? Kelly gasped. You have no idea how deep this goes. Federal judges, prosecutors, even some of your precious task force members. Save it for your lawyer, David replied. That's when Jason Camp appeared at the top of the basement stairs, rifle in hand. Drop your weapon. David spun, but Camp had the high ground and a clear field of fire. For a split second, it looked like Camp would complete Kelly's mission by killing the entire family. The shot that ended Jason Camp came from behind David, Thomas Doyle, leading a team of state troopers down the basement stairs. Camp's body tumbled down the wooden steps, his rifle firing harmlessly into the ceiling. David, everyone okay down here? Doyle called out. We're alive, David replied, finally allowing himself to breathe. He holstered his weapon and ran to embrace Lori and Timothy. As the state troopers secured Kelly and called for medical attention, Doyle pulled David aside. We found evidence in Kelly's car, financial records, witness statements, even recorded conversations with federal contacts. This corruption network is bigger than we thought. David held his family close, feeling Lori's tears against his shoulder and Timothy's frightened but relieved breathing. How big? 3 federal judges, 2 prosecutors, and at least a dozen cops across 4 counties. Kelly was right about one thing. This goes deep. Kelly, now handcuffed and receiving medical attention for his shoulder wound, looked up at David with hatred in his eyes. You think you've won something? My contacts will have you and your family eliminated within a week. David knelt beside Kelly, his voice carrying the cold authority of a man who'd survived 15 years of combat. Cameron, you made two critical mistakes. First, you threatened my family. Second, you assumed I was working alone. Kelly's confident smirk faltered. What do you mean? This whole operation has been recorded and transmitted in real time to federal authorities outside your network. Every conversation, every move your crew made, every corrupt contact you mentioned, it's all documented evidence. The color drained from Kelly's face as he realized the scope of his exposure. David stood, keeping his arm around his son's shoulders. Your network is finished, Kelly. And unlike you, the federal agents taking over this case actually believe in justice. As paramedics carried Kelly upstairs on a stretcher, Doyle shook his head in admiration. Remind me never to piss off someone with your training. David managed his first smile in months. Thomas, you've been a good cop tonight. How would you feel about helping us clean up the rest of Kelly's network? Count me in. But as they prepared to leave the basement, David noticed something that chilled his blood. Kelly was smiling despite his wounds, despite his capture, despite the destruction of his corruption network. That could only mean one thing. Kelly had one more card to play. Chapter 7. The Deeper Conspiracy. 3 days after the Miller Farm confrontation, David sat in a secure federal facility, reviewing files with FBI Special Agent William Irwin. The evidence recovered from Kelly's operation had revealed a corruption network spanning multiple states, but something was bothering David. The scope was too perfect, too convenient. Agent Irwin, David said, studying photographs of C's financial records, this feels like we're only seeing what Kelly wanted us to see. Irwin, a 20-year FBI veteran with silver hair and intelligent eyes, looked up from his laptop. Explain. Kelly's crew kept detailed records of their operations, but career criminals don't usually document their crimes this thoroughly. It's like they wanted to be caught. Maybe Kelly got sloppy. Kelly was many things, but sloppy wasn't one of them. David spread out photographs of Kelly's financial records. Look at these account numbers. They're sequential, the deposits follow predictable patterns, and the paper trail is almost too clean. Timothy appeared in the doorway of the conference room, still moving carefully after his ordeal. Dad? Agent Irwin said you wanted to see me. Come in, son. David gestured to a chair. I want you to think back to when those fake FBI agents came to the house. Did they say anything that seemed odd? Timothy sat down, his expression serious. Mom asked them for their badge numbers, and the woman, Stokes, gave her a number that seemed way too long, like she was reading it off something. Agent Irwin leaned forward. How long? Normal badge numbers are maybe 6 digits, right? This was like 12 or 13, and the guy kept checking his phone, like he was getting instructions. David felt the familiar prickle of danger awareness. Agent Irwin, I need to see the personnel files for everyone who's had access to this case. David, that's... Now, please. 30 minutes later, David was studying FBI personnel records when his blood ran cold. Special Agent Jennifer Stone was listed as assigned to the Metro East Corruption Task Force, but according to her file, she was currently on administrative leave following an internal affairs investigation. Agent Irwin, who assigned Jennifer Stone to this case. Irwin checked his computer. She wasn't assigned. According to our records, Stone has been suspended pending investigation for potentially corrupt relationships with local law enforcement. David's mind raced through the implications. She was never FBI backup. Stone was Jen Stokes, and someone inside your organization gave her enough information to impersonate a federal agent. That's impossible. The security protocols. David's phone rang. Stuart Taylor. David, we have a problem. 3 of the federal judges Kelly named as corrupt contacts have disappeared. Not arrested, not suspended, disappeared. What do you mean disappeared? Judge Morrison was supposed to testify before a federal grand jury this morning. He never showed up, and his security detail can't locate him. Judge Chun and Judge Bradford are also missing. Agent Irwin, was listening to both sides of the conversation. David, who else knew about those judges being named? David felt ice forming in his stomach. Only the people with access to Kelly's confession tapes, which means someone in federal law enforcement is protecting the network Kelly exposed. The secure phone on Irwin's desk rang. He answered it, listened for 30 seconds, then hung up with a pale expression. Cameron Kelly escaped from federal custody during transport to his arraignment. 3 agents are dead. David stood immediately. We need to get my family into protective custody. Now, already arranged, Irwin said. But David, if Kelly's contacts go this high in federal law enforcement, then my family isn't safe anywhere in the official system. David grabbed his jacket. Agent Irwin, I need you to trust me on something. Give me 48 hours before you report my family's location to anyone. I can't do that. Protocol requires. Protocol is what got 3 federal agents killed and allowed Kelly to escape. David's voice carried the authority of command. Someone with high-level access is protecting this network. Until we know who, my family is safer off the official grid. Agent Irwin studied David's face, seeing the determined intelligence that had kept him alive through 15 years of military operations. 48 hours. But David, if you go off-grid, you're on your own. I've been on my own before. As David prepared to move his family to a location known only to him, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. David, this is Cameron Kelly. I told you this wasn't over. Your family will pay for destroying my network. But first, I want you to know who really ordered the hit on you. Check your wife's phone records from 6 months ago. CK. David's hands shook as he accessed Lori's cell phone account. There, buried in 6 months of call logs, was a number that made his blood freeze. Detective Jen Stokes' personal line. The calls had started 4 months before David's undercover operation began. Lori had been in contact with Kelly's network long before David knew they existed. Chapter 8. Ultimate Betrayal. David stared at his wife's phone records in the secure FBI conference room, his world tilting on its axis. 6 months of regular contact with Jen Stokes, including calls that lasted over an hour. The dates corresponded perfectly with David's investigation timeline. Every major development in his undercover work had been preceded by a call between Lori and Stokes. Agent Irwin noticed David's expression. What is it? David couldn't speak. He handed over Lori's phone records, watching Irwin's face change as he processed the implications. Jesus Christ, Irwin whispered. Your wife was feeding them information the entire time. David's voice was hollow. Kelly didn't discover my identity through investigation. Lori gave it to them. Timothy appeared in the doorway. Dad, Mom's asking when we're going to the safe house. David looked at his son, his 16-year-old son who had no idea his mother was a traitor. The pain in David's chest was physical, like a knife twisting between his ribs. Tell her we'll be ready in 10 minutes, David managed. After Timothy left, David pulled Agent Irwin aside. I need to know everything. When did Lori start working with them? How much did she tell them? And most importantly, was Timothy involved? David, you can't interrogate your own wife. The hell I can't. David's military training was overriding his emotional shock. Agent Irwin, my wife has been feeding intelligence to a corrupt police network for 6 months. That makes her an active threat to this investigation and to my son's safety. Irwin made a phone call, and 20 minutes later, they had expanded phone records showing the full scope of Lori's communications. The evidence was devastating. Regular contact with Stokes, Kelly, and even some of the federal contacts Kelly had mentioned. Financial records showed payments totaling $50,000 deposited into an account Lori had opened without David's knowledge. There's more, Irwin said grimly. 3 days after you started your undercover operation, Lori made a 2-hour call to a number registered to federal Judge Morrison, the same judge who disappeared yesterday. David felt like he was drowning. She's been playing me from the beginning. It gets worse. The timing of Kelly's escape from federal custody? Lori made a call to an unlisted number 15 minutes before the transport convoy was ambushed. The conference room door opened, and Lori entered with Timothy beside her. She looked tired but determined, still playing the role of concerned wife and mother. David, Agent Irwin said we need to leave for the safe house soon. I packed bags for all of us. David studied his wife's face. The face he'd loved for 18 years. The face he'd trusted with his life and his secrets. Looking at her now, he could see the subtle signs he'd missed. The careful attention to his conversations, the strategic questions about his work, the way she'd always known exactly where he was going and when he'd return. "Lori," David said carefully, "I need you to sit down." Something in his tone made her pause. "David, what's wrong?" Agent Irwin placed Lori's phone records on the table. "Mrs. Rowe, we need to discuss your relationship with Detective Jen Stokes." The color drained from Lori's face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." 6 months of phone calls, David said, his voice deadly calm. $50,000 in payments. Information about my investigation that you passed along to Kelly's network. Timothy looked confused and frightened. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Lori's mask finally slipped. The loving wife and mother was replaced by someone David didn't recognize. Cold, calculating, desperate. "You don't understand," she said. "They approached me months before your investigation started. They knew about your military background, your investigation work. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt Timothy. So you sold out your husband instead," Irwin said. "I protected my son." Lori's voice rose. "David, you have no idea what these people are capable of. They showed me photographs of families they destroyed, witnesses who disappeared. I did what I had to do to keep Timothy safe." David stood slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his concealed weapon. "And Kelly's escape? Did you protect Timothy by helping a corrupt cop get free so he could hunt us down?" Lori's silence was answer enough. Timothy backed toward the door, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, how could you?" "Sweetheart, everything I did was for you. You betrayed Dad." Timothy's voice cracked. "He almost died because of you." Agent Irwin was already reaching for his handcuffs. "Lori Norris Rowe, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to attempted murder." As Irwin read Lori her rights, David pulled Timothy into a protective embrace. His son was shaking with shock and betrayal, but David's mind was already working through the tactical implications. Kelly was free, he had federal contacts, and he knew that David's wife had been his inside source. With Lori in custody, Kelly would realize his intelligence advantage was gone. That made him exponentially more dangerous, a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. David's phone buzzed with another text from Kelly. "By now you know about your loving wife's cooperation. Don't worry, David. I'm going to reunite your family very soon. Permanently. CK." David looked at his traumatized son, then at his wife being led away in handcuffs. The family he'd fought to protect had been destroyed by betrayal from within. But Cameron Kelly had made one final mistake. He'd threatened the one person David would still kill to protect. Chapter 9. Last day of the hunt. David Rowe sat in the safe house basement at 3 a.m., cleaning his weapons with the methodical precision of a man preparing for war. Timothy slept upstairs under Agent Irwin's protection, emotionally exhausted from learning his mother's betrayal. But David hadn't slept. He'd been planning. The secure phone rang. "Stuart Taylor." "David, Kelly contacted me directly. He wants to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "He claims he has evidence that will expose federal corruption going up to the Deputy Attorney General level. He'll trade the evidence for safe passage out of the country." David's laugh was harsh. "Kelly's lying. He's buying time to get close enough to finish what he started." "Maybe. But David, what if he's telling the truth? What if there's federal corruption at the highest levels? Then we deal with that after Kelly's dead." Stuart's voice carried concern. "You're talking about assassination. I'm talking about protecting my son." David checked the action on his rifle. Kelly's had 18 hours to disappear, to go underground, to leave the country. Instead, he's making contact and offering deals. That means he has unfinished business, which is killing me and Timothy. Kelly's ego won't let him walk away knowing we destroyed his network. He needs revenge. Agent Irwin appeared at the basement door. "David, we've got a problem. Kelly's federal contacts helped him access our safe house protocols. He knows where you are." David wasn't surprised. "How long do we have?" Surveillance spotted 3 vehicles moving toward this location. Professional movement patterns, multiple approaches. Maybe 20 minutes. David stood, shouldering his rifle. Get Timothy to the secondary safe house. What about you? I'm ending this. Irwin started to protest, but David cut him off. Agent Irwin, Kelly's federal contacts make every safe house compromised. Every official protocol puts my son at risk. The only way Timothy stays alive is if Cameron Kelly dies tonight. David, you can't. I can and I will. David headed for the stairs. Keep Timothy safe. That's all I ask. David's choice of battleground was perfect. The abandoned factory complex where he'd first met with Stuart Taylor months ago. Multiple sight lines, elevated positions, and most importantly, no innocent civilians at risk. He'd sent Kelly a simple message. Miller Farm, 1 hour, just you and me. Kelly had responded immediately. See you there, soldier boy. But David wasn't going to the Miller Farm. He was going to force Kelly to come to him, on ground of David's choosing. The factory complex was dark and silent when Kelly's convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs, probably carrying 12 men total. Kelly's voice echoed through a megaphone from the lead vehicle. Rowe, you're not at the farm. Where the hell are you? David's response came from speakers he'd positioned throughout the complex. Military-grade, psychological warfare equipment from a storage unit. I'm here, Kelly, but I'm not playing by your rules anymore. Show yourself. We had a deal. The deal was I'd kill you tonight. I'm keeping my word. David watched through night vision scopes as Kelly's men spread out through the factory complex. They moved well, but they were cops, not soldiers. They cleared rooms methodically but predictably, always advancing, never considering that their target might be directing their movement. David had spent 4 hours preparing the complex as a killing ground. Claymore mines at choke points, tripwires connected to flashbangs, and carefully planned fields of fire that would allow him to engage multiple targets while remaining mobile. The first mine detonated when Kelly's point man entered the main assembly hall. The explosion and screams echoed through the complex, followed by Kelly's enraged shouting. Rowe, fight like a man. I'm fighting like a soldier, David's voice replied from speakers throughout the complex. You brought corruption, murder, and threats against my family. I brought 15 years of combat experience. Kelly's second team entered the administrative building and triggered David's next surprise. Flashbang grenades rigged to motion sensors. In the confusion, David's rifle spoke twice, and 2 more of Kelly's men went down. Kelly, David's voice carried across the complex. Your federal contacts can't help you here. Your corrupt network can't protect you. It's just you, me, and the fact that you threatened my son. Kelly was down to 6 men, including himself, and panic was setting in. These weren't combat veterans. They were corrupt cops who'd gotten used to easy targets and overwhelming advantages. David was giving them neither. The final confrontation came in the factory's main production floor, a cavernous space with concrete pillars and overhead catwalks. Kelly emerged from cover with his remaining men, weapons trained on David's position. Rowe, enough games. Show yourself, or I start sending pieces of your son to federal prosecutors. David's voice came from directly behind them. Timothy's safe, Kelly. But you're not. Kelly spun, firing wildly, but David was already moving. His rifle dropped Kelly's remaining men with surgical precision, center mass shots that ended threats instantly. Kelly himself took cover behind a concrete pillar, his handgun shaking in his grip. You think this ends anything? My federal contacts will hunt you and your son forever. Your federal contacts are already under investigation, David replied, advancing carefully. Agent Irwin traced all the communications. Judge Morrison, federal prosecutor Chun, Deputy Assistant Director Blake, they're all going down. Kelly's desperate laugh echoed through the factory. Then we'll all go down together. He emerged from cover, firing frantically. David's single shot took Kelly center mass, spinning him around and sending him to the concrete floor. David approached cautiously, weapon ready. Kelly was dying, blood pooling beneath him, but his eyes still held defiant hatred. You think you've won something? I protected my son. Your wife, betrayed you. Your family's destroyed. David knelt beside Kelly, his voice carrying the cold finality of absolute judgment. Cameron, you made one final mistake. You assumed I'd choose family over justice. But you threatened the innocent to protect the guilty. That's not a choice. It's a test of character. Kelly's eyes glazed over, his breathing becoming shallow. Character doesn't stop bullets. No, David agreed. But it determines who deserves to survive them. Cameron Kelly died, cursing David's name. But David felt no satisfaction in the victory. Justice had been served, but the cost had been everything he'd thought he was fighting to protect. When Agent Irwin arrived with backup 30 minutes later, he found David sitting beside Kelly's body, weapon disassembled, waiting for arrest. David, you don't have to say anything without a lawyer. I have plenty to say, David replied, starting with the complete list of Kelly's federal contacts and ending with how we prevent this from happening to another family. 3 months later, David sat in a federal courthouse watching the last of Kelly's network receive their sentences. 12 federal officials, including a deputy assistant attorney general, were convicted of corruption charges. The investigation had revealed a network spanning 6 states and involving over 50 law enforcement personnel. Timothy, now living with David's brother in Colorado, was slowly recovering from the trauma of learning his mother's betrayal. Lori had pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and received a 15-year sentence in federal prison. David himself had been cleared of all charges after a federal review board determined his actions were justified self-defense and defense of others. He'd been offered a position with the FBI's Internal Corruption Task Force, work that would use his unique skills to prevent other families from suffering what his had endured. As he left the courthouse, Stuart Taylor walked beside him. Any regrets? David thought about Timothy's bright future, about the corrupt officials now in prison, about the families who would sleep safely because Kelly's network no longer existed. About Kelly's network being destroyed? None. About my family paying the price? Every day. What's next? David looked at the sky, thinking about his son's voice on the phone that morning, excited about his new school, and slowly learning to trust again. I'm going to make sure no other family goes through what we did. And Stuart? I'm going to be a better father to Timothy than I was a husband to Lori. As David drove away from the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. Dad, saw the news about the sentences. Justice was served. Proud of you. See you next weekend. For the first time in months, David Rowe smiled. The grave that Kelly's men had forced Timothy to dig in their old backyard had been filled with something other than David's body. It held the burial of corruption, betrayal, and the naive belief that family bonds were stronger than individual choice. David had learned that true family wasn't about blood relations or legal contracts. True family was about people who stood by you when tested, who chose loyalty over profit, who protected the innocent even when it cost them everything. Timothy had passed that test. Lori had failed it. And Cameron Kelly had paid the ultimate price for threatening the one person David would still kill to protect. Justice, David reflected as he drove toward his new life, sometimes came at a terrible cost. But it was still justice, and it was still worth fighting for. The war was over. The good guys had won. But victory, David now understood, didn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it just felt like survival.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.